If you've been following my channel for any length of time, you probably are aware how organized I try to be when I am practicing the trumpet, doing fundamentals, auditions, or things like that. Well, recently I've been doing sort of a generalized routine that doesn't have nearly as much detail, and I'm kind of maybe just maintaining right now, and it just seems like it's time to get back into a better routine, especially because my season's about to end and the summer's gonna hit, which is, I think, the best time to get better. I thought it would be fun to bring you along while I design this routine so you can see how I make decisions, how I put it together, so that maybe by the end of this video, you could begin to create something that looks like what I create for my routines. So the first thing that I want to do is decide the skills that I want to include in this fundamentals routine. I personally have been on a quest to figure out how to get my articulation to be as clear and as crisp as possible. I feel like I've made great strides on this in the past couple of years, but I'm still working on how to make it easier and how to make it so I don't have to think quite as much to get that kind of ping that I'm looking for. I also want to include flexibility in this routine. I think it's good to include flexibility in any routine, and I'm going to use it to push my limits a little bit. We'll get into that in just a second. I've been working on Clark 4 a lot recently, and I just like it for some reason. And I use it especially for, finger dexterity. That's one of the reasons we practice Clark studies. But what I want to do is, instead of playing straight 16th notes, I'm going to change it to dotted 16th 32nd notes to put a little extra challenge and to just kind of get me out of my comfort zone a little bit. As a principal trumpet, I spend a lot of time in the upper register and the middle register of the trumpet, and I feel pretty comfortable there, but I know for sure that I need to include some low register work in my routine, just because if I don't, it feels less comfortable, and if I get away from me, it's just something I have to include in my routine to feel good about. For a long time during the pandemic, I included multiple tonguing, and I was really good about doing it month after month and pushing my limits and going faster, and then I just stopped doing it. And of course, I can still multiple tongue, but I don't feel like I'm as good at it as I was, so I kind of want to get back on the horse here, so to speak, for multiple tonguing, get this back in here so I can get back to where I was and maybe keep progressing past that. And finally, I want to work on an etude, and there's no better etudes than the Biche etudes for me specifically, because I was working on them for a long time and trying to record them on my YouTube channel, and I just stopped because I got busy, and also the etudes are really hard and I need to get back to it. So hopefully through the process of practicing in this routine, I can get some good recordings in week 3 and be able to share them on my YouTube channel. When I'm first working on articulation with people, I almost exclusively go to things like Arbin or Goldman etudes and kind of break them up. I like how basic they are, where we can focus on the execution of the skill. I've done a lot of that work, and so now I'm into trying to challenge myself a little bit. So what I want to include in this routine is the 15th top tones exercise. What I'll do is split this into 3 different sections based on the music, so that instead of focusing on trying to learn the whole thing straight down, I'm just using these sections to challenge myself with these intervals and the different tonalities to be able to get better and get more consistent with articulation. I'm also going to include the Arbin interval studies from page 129. I want to include these not just because they're challenging, but sometimes I feel like when I play in the low register, I'm manipulating a little bit. It's not quite like it's forward and everything is the same. So I want to play these because it'll give me a chance to sort of anchor on the top note and see if I can change very little about my playing to be able to get the lower register to come out. And hopefully it'll help me gain a little bit more confidence and consistency and just comfort in the low register. For flexibility, I like to include violin exercises, as I mentioned. These ones in the early part of the book are great, even though they seem easy and boring, because it's very purifying, and you really have to have a lot of control with your aperture, a lot of control with your air and sustain. So it really does reveal a lot if I'm struggling with these particular exercises. In addition to that, I want to include violin exercises like on page 14 here that are this 6/8 version, where I'm really going to try to push the tempo on these. It feels a little bit uncomfortable. It feels a little bit more difficult than the duple ones for some reason. And finally, I'm going to include this exercise from violin page 22. I just wanted to include something with wider intervals so I could really work on keeping my air consistent. These are very, very challenging for me, but I know that the only way I'm going to get better at it is if I try to tackle it. So I'm going to include it and do my best. I already mentioned for Clark 4 that I'm going to play them in odds and evens. And I'm going to make some sort of note that says to do it in 16th and 32nd notes. Like I was saying, to do a dotted 16th and a 32nd, so it's not an even rhythm, but I am changing it a little bit to make the fingerings more difficult. Earlier I mentioned for low register, I'm going to play the low register drills from Phil Snedecor's book. And then right now at random, I'm just going to pick Snedecor etude number, let's say 17. And whatever that ends up being, I'm going to play that particular exercise. It doesn't really matter to me. I don't really care. I just want to pick something for a musical context. For multiple tonguing, what I usually do is I usually break these into two types of multiple tonguing. We have exercises that will work on speed and exercises that will work on coordination between my fingers and my air and my tongue. For this, all I'm going to do is pick one double tonguing for speed, one double tonguing for coordination, one triple tonguing for speed, and one triple tonguing for coordination. And finally, for Biche 18, I'm just going to break these up into 3 different sections, maybe 4, depending on what it ends up being phrase-wise. And I'll treat each one of them as their own section. And then in the last week, I will start running it all the way through and get multiple takes of it, and hopefully I can get an actual full run through of it and be able to share it on my YouTube channel. At this point, we have the bare bones of the program itself. We know what we're going to do. Now we just need to assign a couple of values to these things, and we can write an entire program for 3 weeks and get started. I'm going to do this off camera so that you don't have to watch me put this program together. But basically, the questions I'm going to be asking myself are, what tempo do I want to play these exercises at in the end? The next is, how many repetitions do I want to do on a given day? And number 3 is, do I want to play these every day, or do I want to play them every other day, or 4 days a week, or whatever? Okay, so here is my finished routine. You can see on the left side here, I have all of the exercises that I wrote up in the top here. But now I've got all of these values. And so what this means is on day 1, I'm going to play long tones. I didn't say those earlier. Those are kind of just a given for me. I play them all the time at 59 beats per minute with the way that I do it. And then I'll play my top tones at these 3 repetitions. And then I'll come down and play violin page 7 at 63 beats per minute, page 16 at 92, page 21 at 92. And I'll just kind of work all the way down, trying to get the most out of every single repetition. When I'm finished with all this, I'm done for the day. Then I'll come back on day 2 and I have all these repetitions. And it goes on for 3 total weeks. I have a 6-day on, 1 day off approach, so I can get a rest day if I want it. And then here are the goal tempos on this last column right there that I would be trying to aim for by the end of the 3 weeks. This is probably a very overwhelming example of what it looks like to take all of the factors I mentioned earlier into account. We have the goal tempo where we want to end up. We know that it's going to be 3 weeks long. I decided I wanted 3 or 2 repetitions on these shorter technical things that I wanted to improve, to have multiple repetitions. For these violin exercises, I only chose one particular tempo because there are 7 different repetitions, so I don't need multiple repetitions, and that it just gets faster over time. Not all of these tempos are the same. We have kind of a slower one, and a faster one, and then a slower one, a faster one. So I've tried to make the tempos not just a linear slow to fast, but to try to mix it up a little bit, so I'm always guessing, and I think that helps with skill development quite a bit. And then you can see also I have some gaps here and some gaps there and there and there. I'm not playing every single thing every day. And that means that I am working on articulation and flexibility, and I'm working on Clarks, and I'm working on the other skills that I wanted to develop every single day. But because I'm not using the same exercises every day, it allows me to focus on the skill I want to develop and not just get lost in, well, if I learn this exercise, I'll get better. I think it just helps me stay focused on the skill. The final thing that I would say is that ideally speaking, I probably won't do this 100%, but ideally speaking, I would record something from each of these repetitions. So maybe for my long tones, I would record 8 or 10 different notes and then go back and listen to them to make sure I'm on the right track of what I want to accomplish. Maybe I'll record the first and the third repetition on this day to see where I started and then to see where I ended to see if I made progress. Ideally, I would want to be recording a fair amount of these repetitions. So like I said, I can stay on track, I can see how much progress I made, and I can just make sure that I'm getting feedback on my efforts so that my practice is going in the direction that I want it to go. Designing a routine like this takes time. It takes a lot of effort at the beginning. Way before you start practicing, you need to make all these decisions about what you want to do. But when you've designed something like this or something that would be more appropriate for whatever you're looking for, it pays off in the long run because you just have a lot better practice sessions because you know what you're going to do walking in, you know what your goals are, and you know how you're going to accomplish them. If you want to see me do a full live stream playthrough of a different routine that I designed at some point and give commentary on what I'm trying to accomplish, click the link on the screen and check that out. We'll see you in the next video.